Hey, Vinyl community, how's it going? We're back for another Thursday night discussion, and this is actually kind of a sequel to the video that we did last week where we named our 5 favorite artists from the 1980s and talked about 2 of our favorite songs from those artists. And today we are going to be talking about our 5 favorite artists from the 1990s, talking about 2 songs from each. We got Aaron Mutha Alamer with us again. We've got Brandon from Mr. Hall of Fame, Chris from Chris Prophy, Musically Obsessed. Unfortunately, we don't have Gary and Josh with us tonight, but we do want to give a shout out to both of them because we are going to definitely miss them. But we're going to go as a quartet tonight. And we're going to start talking about, we've each picked one honorable mention that we're going to talk about. So, Aaron, you want to give us, well, first of all, actually, I want to back up a little bit. Before you give your honorable mention, I want to ask you 2 questions. Number one, what was going on in your personal life in the 1990s? You know, like, were you in college? Were you may be married? Were you in high school? Like, what was going on? And then what music were you predominantly listening to in the 1990s? So, Aaron, if you want to go first.
All right, that's a good one. So the 90s, let's see, I would have been 30 when 1990 hit. So I got past most of my big party stage when I was just a massive party in the 80s. Well, no, the 90s, well, I was 20. Never mind, go back, I was 20. So that was my big party era. I started about 17 and went to about 33 of just nonstop partying. And, you know, I tried out being in a band. I was a drummer and singer. And then my best friend, who was the guitarist singer, he went on to be in a band, and I toured with them. We went around and ran their lights and their soundboard. And so I had a lot of fun times in the clubs and playing around. They opened up for Arcade one show and Dirty Looks for a show, so they did pretty good. And then they moved to Vegas, became kind of popular down there. And so it was the 90s were a blast. And in the 90s, it was really cool because 4 out of my 5 favorite bands of all time either started or were really big in the 90s. The 80s, you know, a couple of my favorite bands started right in 1990. And in 1991 were all like 3 of my 5 favorite bands. So this to me is almost a more personal decade even than the 80s, just because all my favorites are there. And so I'm going to start with one which we did last week, but I think their 90s work was really good and doesn't get recognized. And that I'm going back to Kiss as my honorable mention for the 90s, because I felt like the 90s were the last decade where they really were kicking ass. And, you know, starting with Revenge, and this album was really good. I mean, it had Unholy and, you know, Domino, Heart of Chrome's my favorite on here. I love that. But I really love the Kiss 90s work. There's that one. And then, of course, they had Live 3, which is the first live album that they put out since the 70s. So they didn't have any in the 80s. And this is their first live album. This is a really good one, too. It's got, you know, a mixture of all their stuff. And of course, I really love this album. I think this is very underrated, where they kind of went in a heavier, almost grunge sound. And I think they pulled it off very well. I really love the song Master and Slave and In My Head. Seduction of the Innocents, one of my favorites. Absolutely love this album. And I think it's very underrated. And then, of course, they had this monster of a great Unplugged album, which was amazing. I love that they had all the 6 members playing on the end. And then, where's it at? Well, I got my Psycho Circus in here somewhere. I guess I misplaced it because I was moving it around. But it's Psycho Circus. So, you know, when this came out, it was just like a refreshing album for them. You know, Eric Carr just passed, and he actually appeared on God Gave Rock and Roll to You Too. He did some vocals on it. It was the last thing he did before he died, which was really cool. And the ballad, Every Time I Look at You, is my favorite ballad Kiss ever did. I love that song so much. It's really good. I think this is a really good album here. I love Revenge. And I just think that the 90s Kiss kind of gets overlooked even more than the 80s Kiss. And I really like it. So,
yeah, I think you're right.
I'll go with my honorable mention.
Well, and then you had the different lineups, you know, they had the reunion. Yeah. And so they were sort of in that period of transition. But yeah, good pick. All right, Brandon.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep my honorable mention pretty kind of straightforward, and I'm gonna hit you with both of these: Metallica, Load and Reload. I think these are definitely, two of the Metallica albums that, there was already the issue with going from their early stuff and when the Black Album came around, and that, disenfranchised a lot of fans that thought they kind of went, the pop way and all that type of stuff. And then I think when Load and Reload came out, it was kind of one more step down that path for a lot of hardcore fans, because not only are they still doing more of a hard rock kind of sound, but now they've cut their hair, they're wearing suits, they're like, Metallica just totally sold us out. And I think a lot of people just brush them off because of that. But these are two absolutely fantastic albums. And I really do consider them hard rock albums and not as much of, metal albums. Even though I think technically, if they probably would have taken the best songs off of each and just made it one album, it would have been a little bit better. But I'm never going to complain about, one of my favorite bands putting out more and more music. But when I like go into Load, which is probably my favorite between the two, just looking through the first two sides with Ain't My Bitch, 2x4, The House That Jack Built, Until It Sleeps. Again, not much on that first side. It's just lightning fast, palm muted, just the speed and thrash we were used to. That they really did just kind of slow it down and made it a very, very just solid hard rock album. And of course, the big hits like King Nothing, Hero of the Day, and stuff like that that had big radio play and so forth. Like I said, it turned a lot of Metallica fans off, but it really just made me respect them more, that they have all these different attitudes of creativity where they can go a lot of directions that a lot of bands can't do. And I think there's a lot of bands that say we don't want to do that, or we would never do that, it's selling out and all of that. But like, it's also kind of convenient that you can't do it, so you know what I mean? And Metallica just kind of had the guts to just go with what they felt. And so again, the same thing with Reload over here. I think Fuel, The Memory Remains, Devil's Dance, again, just fantastic, slow-paced, hard rock, great albums. I mean, any album that starts off with a "Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire." Ooh, it's like, well, come on, it's done. It's like it's done. That's how the album started. Yeah. So that's my honorable mention right there that I talk probably way too much about, more than maybe I'll talk about my own picks.
All right.
I'm a huge fan of Load and Reload, not so much, but I like a few songs on Reload a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But Load, actually, to me, and then what's it called? That's one of my two favorites they've done since And Justice for All, along with I can't think of the name. No, that's my third. It's
Hardwired.
No, the one before it.
Oh, Death Magnetic.
Oh, Death Magnetic.
It would slip in my mind. But I really love Load and Death Magnetic a lot, and Saint Anger. So
yeah, but Load is definitely the better of the two for sure.
All right, Chris.
All right. Well, the 90s were a cool time. I graduated high school in 93. Went off to college, so I was in college from 93 to 97. So I tried to pick some stuff that we were listening to in college. And college is a cool place because you walk by people's dorm rooms and you hear the music that they're playing. And it's like, oh, what is that? And, or sometimes you walk by and everybody's playing freaking Dave Matthews Band. So, nothing against Dave Matthews, but everybody listened to Dave Matthews in college for whatever reason. So yeah, a lot of my stuff that I'm going to show tonight is stuff that we were listening to in college, but that I still listen to today. So my honorable mention, and I wish these guys are so good and they deserve better than an honorable mention, but I'm going with the Mavericks. And the Mavericks are sort of, well, I guess they could be considered a country band, but they mix Cuban flavor into their music. They do country, they do rockabilly. The lead singer, Raul Malo, has one of the most amazing voices. He sounds like Roy Orbison in some songs. The guy, just his range is phenomenal. The musicianship on these records is killer. If you like, country music, but with like a Cuban flavor to it, you should definitely check out the Mavericks. And this album, Trampoline, is really good. And the other album that I didn't have with me tonight, but I do have it, it's called Music for All Occasions. The two songs I'm going to pick, one song off of this I'm going to do is Dance the Night Away. And the song from the album Music for All Occasions is All You Ever Do Is Bring Me Down. And just to show you the diversity of these guys, on that song, All You Ever Do Is Bring Me Down, they have an accordion player. His name is Flaco Jimenez, and he does like Mexican polka. So, I mean, these guys are all over the place musically, but they are freaking amazing. I've never seen them live, but I have friends who have seen them live, and I guess they're a phenomenal band live. So the Mavericks are, just an amazing band from the 90s. They're still going strong too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, in the 90s, I graduated high school in 1988. And so I was finishing up college in the early 1990s. I got married for the first time in 1991, had my oldest child, my daughter, in 1994. And so I was kind of feeling a bit older than I guess I was. I was in my 20s and all these life things were happening. And I was very much in the late 80s into new wave, synth pop, REM, the Smiths, stuff like that, Big Shock. And so when the grunge kind of thing hit, with Nirvana in 1991, I didn't really get it. I wasn't really into Nevermind. I was sort of into Pearl Jam a little bit, but like all that heavy stuff, it was just, it was all over the radio, and it took me a while before I started to appreciate it. And yet at the same time, bands like Depeche Mode were changing their sound, and New Order was getting into more kind of, acoustic and organic instruments. Not that they hadn't before, but their sound was just kind of changing up a little bit. And some of the bands that The Cure were kind of getting into different territory. And so, I was kind of caught in between, both those styles of music. But the artist that I'm going to show as my honorable mention, JC could not be here tonight, but I know this is one that he would have showed. I'm going to go with Morrissey, who obviously was the lead singer of the Smiths. This was his fourth solo album. I don't want to say studio album, because Bone to Drag was technically a compilation of singles and B-sides and stuff like that. But this really was kind of a comeback album, even though it was his fourth album. The album before this, which was Kill Uncle, was really kind of a disappointment. I mean, there was nothing on it that kind of stuck or that was really compelling about it. It was kind of a boring album. And so this really was a return to form. It was a lot more aggressive. I think it took a lot of people by surprise, the same way Achtung Baby took U2 listeners by surprise after Joshua Tree and Rattle and Hum. I mean, his sound is a lot louder, more aggressive. But some of my favorite Morrissey stuff is off here. I mean, right off the get-go, like you got the amazing You're Gonna Need Somebody on Your Side, which is just, it's such a whirlwind, aggressive, almost like a surf rock, like a heavy metal surf rock song. And then the next song, Glamorous Glue, is fantastic. I think that was one of the first songs on the radio. Certain People I Know is great. We Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful was another big single off here. So this album is fantastic from start to finish. It might be my favorite Morrissey album after Viva Hate. Might even actually be better than Viva Hate as I think about it. And then the follow-up, Vauxhall and I, is also equally, they could be almost, sister albums. But you have The More You Ignore Me, The Closer I Get off here. This is a little bit of a quieter album, but it's still Morrissey at the top of his game. Morrissey, great lyricist, great songwriter, and just needed to talk about Morrissey because he didn't make the rest of my list, but had to get him in there, and also wanted to give that nod to Josh because he's a big Morrissey fan.
I'm so happy you showed Morrissey because, and especially Vauxhall and I, that that's probably my favorite album by Morrissey. I love The More You Ignore Me. I love Billy Budd that's on there. Also, isn't Lifeguard Sleeping Girl Drowning on there?
Yeah, my favorite
Yeah.
Morrissey title.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a little bit more subdued, but it's still a killer record.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, now we're gonna be doing our number 5 and number 4. We're gonna be naming the band or artist, and then two of our favorite songs from that artist. So, Aaron, what do you have?
So, as you can tell, all mine are going to be pretty heavy things. I mean, it's me. So, but I'm going to start with this band. It's one of my top 4 thrash bands of all time, and they really took a different turn in the 90s, which a lot of them did. And I'm going to show their first record from the 90s just to show it, but then it's the next ones that I'm really focusing on. But it's Anthrax. This was 1990 with Persistence of Time. The last one with Joey Belladonna up to that point. And that's a great record. But I want to focus on the John Bush years because I don't think they are appreciated enough. And I really love the John Bush era of Anthrax. And starting with this album, The Sound of White Noise, which was just, I remember when this came out, we played this to death. It was just, I mean, starting with Potter's Field, and then High Pro Glow, something about that song just stuck in my head. But the song I'm going to go for on this one is Invisible. It's one of my favorite songs, and I had a lot of friends kind of like that, where you call yourself my greatest friend. I mean, and would you make yourself invisible? Like when the times get rough, it's talking about that. I love that song, and Sodium Penthol's on here, and this is an actual original European release, which is odd. They don't have Black Lodge on this one, so I had to get the repress just for Black Lodge, and it's got a couple extra songs on it too, which is cool. And I really love these John Bush era. This is actually my favorite of the John Bush era. It's Stomp 442. It had Dimebag Darrell playing a lot of guitar, a lot of leads in it, along with Charlie Benante, because Dan Spitz had left. And the song Nothing from this is probably my favorite. Kind of the same as Invisible, kind of the same type of song. But Random Acts of Senseless Violence, and this is just a very aggressive, very catchy album. I really love this, and I put this up against any of the Joey Belladonna era Anthrax albums as well. It's just, they're almost like two different bands. This is more of a groove oriented, and they were more thrash, and I like them equally as well. Of course, they also had this album, which a lot of people don't like, but I love this album too. Amazing, love it. So Anthrax is my first pick, and John Bush doesn't get the recognition that I think he should. I saw them live on tour, and they were amazing live. He did all the early Anthrax stuff really well, sung it killer. It was really cool. So, and my next band only existed in the 90s, and they're one of my favorite bands. I show them all the time, of course, like all these, but it's this band here. Probably they kind of invented the modern era of like sludge stoner rock, stoner metal, and it's Caius. A very influential band. This is their album Wretch, their debut, and it's an amazing record. Had John Garcia on vocals, who has gone on to do a bunch of things. Josh Homme was the guitarist, who ended up going on and creating Queens of the Stone Age, Eagles of Death Metal, Them Crooked Vultures, and all those bands. And Nick Oliveri, the bass player, has done a lot. Brant York, the drummer, played with Fu Manchu for a bit. So these guys this band spawned a whole bunch of great bands afterwards. And then they put out this record here, The Blues for the Red Sun, which is an amazing record, one of the best records of the 90s. And the song Green Machine, I remember seeing that video and just freaking out about just how different and distorted it was. I just love John Garcia's vocals on it. And they've got a song called Thong Song, which is about flip-flops. Really cool song. It's kind of a slower one. It's like, I hate slow songs. It's a slow song, and then it gets heavy. Really cool. And Caius is a very influential band. This album came next, Welcome to Sky Valley. And it's kind of it's a really unique record. It's almost like a concept progressive space rock masterpiece here, and a lot of people think this is one of the best albums of the 90s too. It's really good. It actually was split into 3 movements, so when you get it on CD, you have all these first songs, and that's track 1, then track 2, and track 3. So it's really different when you get it on CD. It's kind of cool. but it's just, they're such a unique band, and they were so influential in the alternative stoner rock metal genre that they've a lot of bands have come after them, and they influenced a lot of them. So I really love them. One of my favorite bands. Demon Cleaner was the other song I was going to mention from this, and that was actually on one of those Guitar Hero games. I don't remember which one. I think maybe Guitar Hero 2, but they actually had Demon Cleaner from this on there, which is kind of interesting. It's a really cool song, really killer stuff there.
I've looked for that Welcome to Sky Valley. It's not easy to find.
Yeah, I jump all over the Kaya stuff when I see it. So I've been a big fan for years.
Yeah. All right, Brandon.
Nice. Yeah, I jumped so fast into the Metallica thing. I forgot to mention the first part about where I was in the 90s, which ties right into kind of my first pick here. I went to college in 91, and kind of going into college, my musical world had basically revolved around the 80s new wave I was still carrying, but mostly glam and hip hop is all I was listening to. So Chris, like you hit the nail on the head when you talked about one of the magical things about those years is when you're walking down the halls and just hearing different stuff coming out of different rooms. And I vividly remember that's when I first heard my suite mate New Order Bizarre Love Triangle for the first time, and just completely blew my mind. That's when I first heard 10,000 Maniacs, Alanis Morissette, and all of that. And one other artist that kind of fits into that kind of hearing for the first time, I'm gonna pick one of my favorites, are the Cranberries. I just thought that the main thing that always drew me to them was Dolores's voice. I mean, just with that Irish accent that she had and the way that she delivered, there was just something that always struck a chord with me, just hearing the way she delivered the music that she delivered. And so, you know, off of this album here, which is probably my second favorite album by them, you know, the awesome song, which is Zombie, which kind of actually kind of gave you a little more of the heavier side of what they could do. But what I really appreciated about her so much really was her softer side, which is, I think, is well on display in this album here, which was kind of their, sorry, get the glare out of their gigantic debut. Everybody else is doing it, why can't we? And I think the thing that really made her stand out to me, I keep saying her, the Cranberries, but mainly Dolores, is especially in that 90s time when you had a lot of the female alternative artists like Alanis Morissette and all of that, it kind of became a thing about woman power, right? It was kind of like a hear me roar and all this type of stuff. And it just seemed like she was not too scared to keep it in a very softer, more vulnerable place. So when I think of my two favorite songs, they're actually going to come both off of this album, which is Dreams and Linger, with Linger definitely being my absolute favorite. That was more of their, you know, regular rotation, their biggest pop hits and things of that nature. But just the amount of vulnerability that she shows in Linger was just something that I connect with every single time I hear that song. Because again, she just makes it so clear that she's in such a vulnerable place, and she's completely at the mercy of this person that she's with. And it's kind of like, and I'm not scared to say it. I'm not scared to, you know, put that out, even though everyone is telling me it should all be about woman power. And, you know, everyone from Nirvana to Pearl Jam to everything going on is about, you know, this power, this taking charge type of thing. And that was just a beauty that stood out to me in the 90s. So Linger and Dreams going to be the two songs I picked from the Cranberries.
Yeah, I really feel like they're kind of closely related to 10,000 Maniacs. But I feel like Doris O'Riordan, you know, her voice has got way more emotion than Natalie Merchant does. And she's got that vulnerability. I mean, even that part in Dreams where she's kind of, you know, the part that I'm talking about, I can't sing it, but, you know, you'd never hear Natalie Merchant kind of go off like that. It's almost kind of like her Yoko Ono moment, sort of, you know, right. And I mean that in a good way. I don't mean it in like, you know, oh, it hurts my ears, but, you know, she would just let her voice go, and she, you know, was not afraid to just kind of let loose with it.
Yeah. And you go back and watch that video for Lingered. I mean, with that black and white walking through those strange halls and all these different images, it was like you were just really inside of the dark, lonely side of her, and you could just feel every note of that. It's just absolutely magical to me. So definitely one of my favorites.
Mhm.
Now, my next one here, my second pick is actually kind of going just the opposite direction. And this is a band that I still think to this day is one of the heaviest bands, but probably doesn't quite get credit for it. And it's going to be Stone Temple Pilots, especially this album Core. I mean, with all the different things, I could go look through it in my, metal section, through my thrash and all of that. I really have not experienced an album that I feel is heavier than Core. There's just something about the fullness of the delivery. Anytime things get very rhythmic with me, it's something that kind of turns up my heavy button as opposed to speed. And they just do such a great job of filling in the gaps of sound. That's kind of the easiest way I can describe it. And it's just every song on this album really it's just a gut puncher. So when it comes to all of the grunge stuff that took place in the 90s, this is still my absolute standout band above Pearl Jam, above Nirvana, above all, even Soundgarden, all of that stuff. And I know, what's his name? Who's the lead singer? Weiland, I think it was. Yeah, I'm going a little brain dead here. Caught a lot of flack for everyone saying he was kind of sounding like Vedder from Pearl Jam. And I know for the longest time he had kind of a little bit of a beef going with MTV because there was a number of comments that were made to his face about him sounding like that. And he just kind of did a whole screw you type of thing. And I think he actually demanded one of the VJs apologize to him before they ever came back on the air with MTV. But again, I think it's the other way around. I think a lot of those bands, in my opinion, were following what Stone Temple Pilots were doing. So that's going to be my absolute favorite album by them. My second one is going to Purple there. Again, just a great follow-up. I mean, this came out in '94. Not overall as heavy as Core, so that's typically why I favor Core a bit more, but still just a very, very solid album with stuff like, Interstate Love Song, Vaseline, things like that are just still, excuse me, amazing tracks. But if I'm looking at picking my two favorite songs, I have to go with Wicked Garden and Dead and Bloated. And it goes back to those same two factors I mentioned from the beginning. It's just such a heavy, thick punch that when those songs kick in, they're almost kind of overwhelming. Even with Dead and Bloated being such a slow BPM song, like, the beats per minute in that song is just kind of dragging on. But that guitar tone and just, again, the way they fill all the voids, just really, really powerful stuff. So STP is going to be my number 2 there.
Nice.
Great choice.
Nice.
Yeah, for some reason.
I really like the third album. It's probably my favorite, but I love all three of those.
Yeah, for some reason, Stone Temple Pilots has never been. Yeah, I think I got a little bit of an internet issue, but go ahead, Chris.
All right. Yeah, Stone Temple Pilots was a great choice. I mean, I feel like they were definitely a band that, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people were listening to in college. I remember them. So I'm a huge folk music fan, and I play a lot of folk music on my guitar. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I write is sort of folky, even the way that I finger pick the guitar. It has like a folk vibe to it. I love the singer-songwriters from the 70s. So I identify with this band, and I can't think of a better folk duo than the Indigo Girls. And I think the Indigo Girls really, they were shining during the 90s. And this album came out, Swampophilia, in '94. And I'm going to pick the song off of here called Mystery. It's just a beautiful song. The Indigo Girls are, they're a duo, Emily Saliers and Amy Ray. And Amy Ray has sort of a rougher quality to her voice. Emily always sort of had that melodic, pretty tone to her voice. So the two of them together, it just makes this really neat dynamic. And you get kind of, Amy brings more of a rock edge to her songs. Like there's even some pictures of Amy wearing a Husker Du t-shirt in some of the pictures of the Indigo Girls. She kind of came from that side of things, where Emily came from more of like the Joni Mitchell sort of side of things. But the song Mystery, beautiful song off of this album. And another Indigo Girls album that I really like is called Shaming of the Sun, which came out in 1997. Now, the big hit off of this was called Shame on You. And I feel like it was all over the radio, at least around the Buffalo area where I went to school. I mean, I don't know if in 97, if it was playing anywhere else, but I definitely think it was a hit for them. This was a more rocking type album for them. I think they were sort of trying to branch out from the whole folk genre. So if you're kind of scared to get into the Indigo Girls, this might be a good album to start with because it's got more of a rock edge to it. And yeah, I'm going to go with the song Shame on You off of this record. But I mean, listen, anything by the Indigo Girls is killer, but these two albums are really good. And Brandon talked about Metallica before, and I wanted to talk about Metallica too. And I, definitely picked out Load and Reload. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't like these albums when they first came out. I remember when I first heard them, I'm like, wait a second, this isn't, Master of Puppets. This isn't And Justice for All. This isn't even the Black Album. This is something completely different. And I think, like Brandon was saying, I think I was thrown off by the look. They were, like you were saying, Brandon, they were wearing the suits. They had some makeup. All of a sudden, what's his name? Anton Corbin or whatever, who does the photographs for U2. He was doing photographs for Metallica, so I was thrown off by that whole thing. But these albums have really, really grown on me over the years. And I really look at these as very, very strong albums by Metallica. Now, it's not Ride the Lightning, but it's Metallica doing, like a harder edged hard rock. And the two songs I'm going to pick Until It Sleeps off of Load. Killer song. And I'm a sucker for a ballad. I'm going Unforgiven 2 off of Reload. I think this is a song where Kirk Hammett almost sort of has like a country sort of sound to his guitar in this. But like Brandon was saying, Slayer couldn't do this. And I love Slayer, but only certain metal bands could make albums like this. And Metallica was able to do it because they are a very, just a very talented band. And I think they wanted to show you that, hey, we can thrash, but we can also make it a timeless record that, could go along with physical graffiti or Use Your Illusion or something like that. And I think Load and Reload will probably go down in history as being like some of those albums. And, it would have been cool to hear a single record, take all the good tracks and make one, but, still, they're two great albums.
Very cool.
I actually have a weak track. I like Load a lot, especially like The Cure. I like that song a lot.
Yeah, but you know what? It's sort of, they lose me in the song Ronnie. Not a big fan of Ronnie. And I don't know. Yeah, I was trying to think if there's something else. The Cure is kind of for me.
That's one of my favorites.
Really? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know. They're not bad songs. I just feel like out of all the songs, not really into those two tracks. And it's funny. Brandon said he prefers Load. I actually prefer Reload over Load. But that's what's great about music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff that was different on that album, because even when you think about stuff like Devil's Dance, where they were using like a voice box on the guitar solo.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, there were so many new things that were coming into play. It's like, wait, are you Metallica? Or are you Roger and Zapp? Like,
Right.
what just happened here? But again, they pulled it off, and even if people don't think that maybe their, you know, greatest works and all of that, I think albums like that, if nothing else, what they do is they keep the band fresh and keep the band staying in a creative mode.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, we did end up getting Death Magnetic. I think Hardwired was a fantastic album. I think it takes that type of stuff to keep the juices flowing, just to stay creative. So, you know,
well, and to go along with that point too, I know this is not a Metallica video, but Aaron and I did a whole video on Saint Anger, and I think Saint Anger was important because it was almost like a purge. Like, let's clear everything out. Let's make this dirty ass album. And then, okay, we got that out of our system. Now we can go on. So it was almost like a purge or a palate cleanser. But I saw this ticket on the back here. I saw Metallica in 2003 on the Summer Sanitarium tour.
Nice.
So I think, I want to say Limp Bizkit played with them. I hate Limp Bizkit, but I think the Deftones might have played with them as well. But Metallica put on a great show. So sorry, Limp Bizkit fans.
Yeah. No apologies. No. But anyway, I won't go into Limp Bizkit, but I've made my stance on them pretty clear before. But I'm gonna work my way backwards. So I'm gonna start with one of the last artists that I got into, or the most recent artist, and then kind of work my way backwards. And so I know I've talked about this artist before on other group videos that we've done. I think I did just a video on my channel about this artist, but I consider him one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time. Definitely one of the most tragic figures. And his story is very sad, but I'm talking about Elliott Smith. And he was an artist who, his first couple of albums, he actually wrote all the songs, plays all the instruments, drums, bass, guitar, piano, everything on his own. And he put it all together, kind of like Emmett Rhodes. You know, his first couple of albums were completely, he recorded all of the instruments himself. Same with like McCartney. Yeah, exactly. But two songs that I picked from him just kind of illustrate what a fantastic songwriter and artist he is. The first one I'm going to go with is off of this album, which is called Either Or. And I'm going with the song Say Yes. This album it came out in 1997. And the song is basically, it's about just how complicated relationships are, and how you kind of fall in and out of relationships, and sometimes with the same person, and you break up, and then next thing you know, you're back in their arms again, or back in their bed again. And it's sort of, just trying to, when you're young, trying to work out all of that. And just kind of the unpredictability of, relationships, and what the other person's thinking. And he just does it in such a sweet way. It's just him and his guitar. It's a real gentle kind of a ballad, but it works and it's effective. And that's what I love about it, because he could just take, a complicated subject and just turn it into such a, turn it with a great melody and a great vocal. And I think this might have been in a Wes Anderson movie. I don't know. Several of his songs ended up in Wes Anderson movies. The second song that I'm going with, and this was the first album where he actually had a band behind him. This is his fourth album. And this is XO. And the song that I'm going with on this one it's called Waltz Number 2, and in parentheses XO. So it's almost the title track off of here. And if you know anything about Elliott Smith, his upbringing was not a happy one. He had a stepdad, his dad had left. And so he lived with his stepdad and his mom. And the stepdad was not very nice to him. Stepdad did not treat him very good. And so this song is actually a song about his relationship with his stepdad and his mom. And it's done in waltz time, like the title would suggest. It's got like a honky tonk Old West piano. There's like an acoustic guitar. It's just it's an interesting arrangement that he uses on this song, but this is how he characterizes his mom. And the interesting thing about the song is, you know, he opens up the song and he's talking about this couple who obviously are miserable. And you think he's just making an observation about some couple that he runs across in a karaoke bar. And then you come to realize he's actually talking about his mom and his stepdad. And this is how he characterizes his mom. He says, "She appears composed, so she is, I suppose. Who can really tell? She shows no emotion at all, stares into space like a dead China doll. I'm never going to know you now, but I'm going to love you anyhow." And then he talks about his dad this way. He says, "Tell Mr. Man with impossible plans, just leave me alone. In the place where I make no mistakes, and the place where I have what it takes." So he's basically, you know, his dad was very critical of him, like, "You're no good." And, you know, it's just an interesting way that he, you know, is looking back on that relationship. And it's a very vulnerable song. You know, you talk about the Cranberries and how vulnerable, you know, Dolores Riordan could be. But Elliott Smith, I mean, that to me, that song is his masterpiece. And it's basically, you know, his childhood, his upbringing in a 3.5-minute song. But it's so, you know, so emotionally raw. And he still has some affection for his mom. And, you know, it's called XO because XO is almost like the most superficial, you know, way to say I love you. You know, hugs and kisses, you know, we always kind of put it at the end of any, you know, correspondence if you used to write a letter. And, you know, it's sort of him trying to, you know, reach out to his mom and say, you know, in spite of it all, you know, I still love you, even though I'm never going to know, you know, why you made the decisions you made. And, you know, he's really got nothing good to say about his stepdad or their relationship. So it's just a really, I mean, it's basically, you know, Elliott Smith distilled down into a 3.5-minute song. And that's what he wrote about. He wrote about his life. And, you know, if you know also about his story, he got, you know, heavily addicted to drugs in the early 2000s. And he was either brutally murdered or he committed suicide in a very sadistic way. He stabbed himself in the heart with a steak knife, or he was murdered that way. But it's just a really, really tragic ending. And you almost feel like it didn't have to be that way. But, you know, he had so much baggage and so much that had happened to him. Fame, you know, happened to him, and he started to become more popular. He couldn't deal with it, and he just unraveled. And it's really tragic because he was such a, you know, by all accounts, a sweet human being, but he just couldn't outrun his demons. And at the end, you know, they kind of caught up with him. And, you know, unfortunately, we lost him at a very young age. So the next artist that I want to talk about is Radiohead. Love Radiohead. And this was the first album that I bought by them. I've been familiar with some of their songs on the radio, but I'd never heard a single track off of this, but I'd read a great review of the album in a magazine, and that was OK Computer. And I listened to it, and this was like the 90s version of Dark Side of the Moon. For me, it blew me away. Every song on it was just amazing, blew my mind listening to it all the way through. And the song that I'm picking off of this one is Paranoid Android, which is a progressive rock track. I'm sorry, but it goes through so many different movements, and there's different suites, different tempos, and it rocks hard in spots and it's soft in spots. And Tom York, his voice is, you know, we're talking about vulnerability again, but he has just such a unique, distinct voice. And that song takes you on a journey from the beginning until the end. And you're just so exhausted and spent after you listen to it. But it is one of my favorite tracks of the 1990s. And then I'm going to go with the song Creep off of their debut album, Pablo Honey, which still today, that song, I mean, you talk about the, you know, which Nirvana did very well, where you go from soft and quiet to very loud, very aggressive, and then back to soft chorus, then aggressive, or I'm sorry, soft verses, and then aggressive chorus. But just the melody, just, you know, that song, which we've all felt that way before about, you know, I'm never going to be good enough for this girl who I'm attracted to, and you pine for somebody you know is totally out of your league, and you feel like a creep for even wanting to be with that person, and you know it'll never happen. And so, you know, this is sort of like Tom York singing for all of us who've been in that position, feeling like we're never going to be with that person who's totally out of our league. But it doesn't mean we don't ever, you know, stop wishing and putting ourselves out there. But so those are my picks.
Yeah, I remember you had talked about Elliott Smith, and I picked up Roman Candle. And it's really good. I have to spin it more, but yeah, I bought this from your recommendation. So really good.
Yeah,
artist.
it's got a very that one's got a very lo-fi sound to it. That was his first album, and yeah, he just did it on a tape recorder, played everything himself, mixed it, and put it out there. But
Nice.
pretty great.
You talk about his vulnerability. You mentioned that a couple of times. And I first discovered Elliott Smith, that Either Or album, watching Good Will Hunting. There was 2 or 3 songs off that album that was featured in the movie. And what drew me to him was that scene where Will and the girl kind of split, and she was going across, you know, leaving town or whatever. And Angelus was playing in the background. And just the way he was delivering that song and the way it got caught up in that scene, I was just like, I have to find out who this is. And Either Or is my first album taking me to him. That's amazing, amazing album.
Yeah, if you want to find out, if you're interested in exploring more about him, there's a documentary called Heaven Adores You. It should be available on some streaming service. I've got it on DVD, but I mean, it takes you through his life, and you know, very interesting and tragic individual, but so extremely talented as well.
Yeah. Great picks.
Thanks. Okay, we're back to you, Aaron.
All right. So this next band I'm going to talk about, I talk about all the time. All these I do really, because this is like my wheelhouse, this era. But this band only had 2 albums. They started in 1990, and it was kind of, they started a little too late. If they would have started in 88, 87, they had the potential to be a huge band, but they had bad promotion and all that. And this album here, I remember reading about it in Metal Edge magazine, and it described them as being a combination of early Van Halen and Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. That's kind of what they sound like. And this is Sweet Fave with Stick to Your Guns. Absolutely my favorite album of any band of the quote hair metal era, although this is a little more mature than that. It's got very good vocals. They do acoustic. Their drummer actually came from a thrash band, so he has a really like a heavier style to his drumming, and just amazing lyrics and vocals, amazing crafted songs. Just starting out with Prince of the City just gets you in this groove and it just bumps you up. But I remember when I first got this, me and my friends I went and bought the cassette the day it came out, and we were doing some work for my friend's dad. And so we were under his basement in this little crawl space digging, and we had it on the tape deck playing, and we were all just like, holy hell, what is this? And then the next song, Nothing for Nothing, comes on, and we were just like blown away. It was just like just high energy, great sounding songs. And the one I'm picking from this is the title song, Stick to Your Guns, which starts out acoustic, which they do very well. They have 2 really great guitarists, and one of them is nicknamed Lightning and one nicknamed Thunder, and that kind of is how their playing is. But the song Stick to Your Guns starts out acoustic, and it just kind of builds and builds and becomes this epic sing-along, and it goes back down to the acoustic, and it's just such an amazing song. And you know, there's so many times we were partying, we'd have the whole party, just everyone singing along to Stick to Your Guns. A lot of the songs from this album, really, and because all my friends were into them, we were like a little group of people that really knew this band. And you know, we'd drive around drinking, singing along, and just drinking beers, and just a great album. And they unfortunately came out in 1990 when that was fading out. And then they came out with this, their only other album was Temptation, their second album. And they had lost their bass player at the time. So, but this is another amazing record. and it has that same sound. A lot of the acoustic, they have the heavy rocking stuff, the like the catchy rock songs, all of it mixed in. But the thing that really stands out is they do the best power ballads of any band ever. And my favorite one of all time is on this, called Your Love. My favorite power ballad of all time. It's amazing. I just absolutely love it. And it's there's the tracks. This is a very hard record to find on vinyl. And Your Love right here is, and then there's also Paralyzed by You, but Your Love is the one I'm using. It's hands down my favorite power ballad of all time. And just amazing all the way through both those records. And one of the probably my favorite band that nobody knows about. And it's not because nobody knows about them, but I was just totally into them the whole time they were out, and I still am. Still listen to them a lot.
Yeah, I never heard of them before until you started pumping them up.
Yeah, I should be their promoter because I talk about them a lot.
Yeah, I've never heard of them either. I just wrote it down actually to check it out after we get done, because I've never heard it.
Yeah, Stick to Your Guns, that whole album, starting with Prince of the City. It's just, it has that, I mean, they have like a couple songs where they almost have that Van Halen, like bop, bop, bop thing, where they sing like that, little parts. It kind of reminds you of old Van Halen, but it has a kind of a Guns N' Roses edge at times. It is a good mixture of those sounds. And then my next band, so, you know, I was into the hair metal, thrash, all that. And then I got it out of order. This album came out and just totally changed my musical landscape forever. And this, you know, I'm one of the people that loved the heavy metal, the thrash, and grunge. I was really into grunge too. And because of this record right here, this one totally changed my life when it came out. It actually came out before Nirvana's Nevermind. And I remember seeing the video for We Die Young. And that video, they had a video of them just playing it live before they got the full video. And it was on MTV. I recorded it and played it over and over. Me and my friends were just like, holy crap, this just sounds so different. It's got that heavy guitar, and it's the singing that Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell mixed together that was so amazing. But the song that really did it for me was when I first heard It Ain't Like That. It was just so different. It's almost like what Brandon was talking about with Stone Temple Pilots, has that sound where it just kind of fills in everything. And It Ain't Like That. It just has this, it was so different when it came out. And I'd never heard anything quite like, and it became my favorite band, you know, one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite albums of all time. Every song I love on it. I think Lane Staley is amazing, was amazing. And that's the thing, when I was into the grunge, I was more into Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Mother Love Bone, because I never really got into Kurt Cobain's singing style. I didn't like it at first. I've grown to appreciate it now, but back then this was the band for me. And then when the cool thing about them, they had that heavy album, it was really different. And then they came out with this, which is all acoustic. And it was totally the opposite facelift. And the song Brother is what I'm going for this. Had Ann Wilson on backing vocals. So Ann Wilson, Lane Staley, Jerry Cantrell all singing on it. And it totally blew me away too. It was like Alice in Chains, we were expecting another facelift, and Sap comes out. And it's like, this band is so diverse and so talented. They can put out an acoustic album after the success of Facelift. They went the total opposite direction. And then they went back to Dirt, and then Jar of Flies. But it's just every song, every album they did with Lane Staley is a masterpiece, I think. And I even like the stuff after him too. I like all their stuff, but especially the Lane Staley stuff. It's just amazing. And, you know, this is very cool because I also have the song Right Turn, which is amazing because it's two of my favorite singers of all time, Lane Staley and Chris Cornell, singing together on a song. Both who have passed away now, and that song still blows me away too. So yeah, those two bands right there at that time were the ones that were just totally in my musical taste. Everything after came from from those two bands.
So I am lucky enough to have that Sweet FA album because Aaron sent it to me. So I need to listen to that again because I remember that is a very good album. You're right.
It's just so high energy. The songs are so catchy, and the singing's really good. And it ends with an totally acoustic song that's really cool. And it starts off just it's not like thrash. It's like a little heavier than just normal, what you call hair metal. And it's a little more intricate playing, but it's in that style. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about them.
Well, Lane Staley, another tragic figure,
Oh, yeah.
you know, died alone in his home with his drugs, and
Yep.
you know, had so much more, I'm sure, to give. But you had those early Alice in Chain albums are just perfection.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is amazing, like you were saying, the way they could go back and forth between, you know, bringing the heavy stuff like they brought on Facelift, and my first song by them was Man in the Box. So, you know, again, a completely blown away, and then to come right back with, you just pick anything like Nutshell or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, like, how do you go back and forth and just keep it that amazing? Just the power of Lane's voice was absolutely amazing.
It's crazy because when you see him sing, it doesn't look like he's even trying. It just comes out, and he's just like just really still, and it's just, he isn't like, you know, like some people. It's really cool.
It's
and
just
I'm glad you really notice it.
Right. That's awesome. Good pick.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm up for the next two.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so the next one here is actually a band that's kind of been through the 80s, 90s, and I think they've had something in the 2000s. I know as a solo artist, she's had something in the 2000s, but it's a band that I really didn't catch on very, very strong to until really just kind of the last few years. And it is Everything But the Girl. You know, really the only thing I'd heard from them back in the 90s, which was off of this album, was the song Missing, which was it was a big hit, you know, a lot of radio play and so forth. And I loved it. But I think there was something about me that just took it as that's the kind of band they are. It's just kind of a little dancey, kind of poppy type of thing, you know, playing around on the edges of the electronic thing and all of that. And I just planted it in my mind that that's who they were. And as I kind of got a little further down the line and really dove into them, what I discovered is each time you buy one of their albums, you have no idea what you're going to get. Is it going to be an acoustic type of, not folk, but an acoustic type of album that has a lot of country flavor to it? Yes, you'll get that. Are you going to throw it on? It's going to be some, you know, kind of not 80s new wave, but definitely something that's kind of floating around in that genre. Yes, you're going to get that. Oh, here comes a complete and total jazz vocal album. It's just the thing that made them so amazing was Tracy Thorn, or her vocals were just so silky smooth that they really could bounce between genres. And I think as a duo, it gave Ben Watt, I think it gave him a lot of freedom to kind of go different directions on each album that they did, because he knew Tracy's voice can take on anything that we do. And again, just the more and more I dive into them, I just get more and more impressed, like kind of we were talking about with Lane, like how do you go back and forth between all of these genres and do it so easy, so fluid, and it just sounds like you've been in that genre the entire time you guys have been together as a duo. But I really got misled by, again, just jumping on that one song Missing and automatically excuse me, kind of pigeonholing them to that sound. But that was definitely the big hit off of this album. And the other thing I love about Tracy too is she's one of those great examples that don't let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. You know, she it's so interesting when you hear her doing interviews, she talks with a really, really kind of defining lisp. You know, like it's almost like over exaggerated. And it's not the kind of person that you would hear talking and all of a sudden think you're going to hear this amazing, beautiful voice just come out in all of these things that she sings. But she definitely pulls it off and just has a phenomenal vocal talent. So that's going to be album number 1 by them.
Yeah, they kind of took the template of the Eurythmics into the 90s and, you know, explored even further.
Yeah,
the Eurythmics did, because obviously the Eurythmics broke up in the early 90s, but yeah, great band.
Yeah, the exact same type of mold. And then the next album I'm going to go with, sorry, maybe all kind of glare there. is this one here, which again is one that I didn't discover until really the past 3 or 4 years. I mean, it really kind of took me that long to get back around to this one, which is Walking Wounded. This is from 1996. And this probably has my second favorite song off of them, which is Wrong. So even though I appreciate so much with the different type of jazz vocal and all of that stuff that they do, it really kind of goes back to the more poppy radio friendly hits that still are my absolute favorite by them. So my two songs are going to be Missing and Wrong. Those are my two favorite tracks by them. But again, if you're not familiar with them for some reason, it's just check out an album, and if you don't like that one, check out the next one, because it's going to be something completely different every time.
Cool.
So that's my third pick there. Going into my fourth pick, another band, which is one that I discovered roaming the halls through college. Same thing. And man, I'll really just kind of jump right into this one. It's going to be the Gin Blossoms. And again, I think what I liked about the Gin Blossoms so much at the time, and even to this day, I still don't know a ton about the band. I've just listened to their music forever. But there was something about the way that Robin Wilson, the lead singer, something about the way that he delivered his lyrics, but he wasn't afraid to really kind of maintain a beauty in his melody. Because again, I think just like in the 80s when stuff became very new wave and synth pop and everything kind of went that direction, I felt like a lot of that happened in the 90s too, where it seemed like some people were just really afraid to go with a more melody friendly type of approach. It was almost like if you weren't going, again, hard enough or grungy enough or whatever, that you weren't really cool or in. So that was the thing about the Gin Blossoms, is everything that I heard by them was always, God, that's such a beautiful melody. God, the way he's singing on top of that, something that's just flowing and connecting really well. And I remember a suite mate had the little single of Hey Jealousy. And I used to I borrowed that from him, and I would just play it all the time. I was like, I absolutely love this song. It takes off, it takes you for a nice ride. There's great, kind of underlying guitar playing in it. It's nothing kind of big and upfront that's like, shredding your ear or anything, but it's just something that Robin's voice was just kind of flowing really nicely on top of. And when you go down the list of just other things throughout, there were big hits for him, like Found Out About You and everything else. It's all following that same formula, just great melodies, which is the same thing that you find on this album here. Again, sorry about the glare, guys. So here you have Congratulations, I'm Sorry, and Follow You Down. All of that, it's following that exact same formula. So the two songs I'm going to pick are going to be actually those two, Hey Jealousy and Follow You Down. I think those are still my two favorite songs by the Gin Blossoms.
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned the Gin Blossoms. I played a live show last night, and I played Hey Jealousy.
Oh,
and,
really?
I kind of do it a little differently. I slow it down and do it in a different key, but I still love that song. I love the lyrics of that tune too.
Yeah, such a beautiful song. I'd love to hear that. If you ever have video of that, maybe I'll post it on your channel.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, maybe I'll if it's not too late tonight, maybe I can record it tonight and put it on my channel. We'll see.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But that's my 3 and 4.
Cool. All right. Well, I was going to show Rearview Mirror by Pearl Jam as one of my songs, and I was also going to show Off He Goes from No Code. But I'm not going to talk about those two. What I am going to talk about,
honorable mention.
What I am going to, here's the thing. I was going to talk about Pearl Jam, and I can't believe I almost forgot about this artist. One of my favorite artists. He had a renaissance in the 90s, and that is Mr. Johnny Cash.
Oh, yes.
I cannot believe that I almost did not put him in my list. So I had to take Pearl Jam off and put Johnny Cash in. Huge Johnny Cash fan, but I probably would never have known about Johnny Cash if it wasn't for Rick Rubin. and the albums that he came out with in the 90s. And we, you know, if you're a music lover, you know, Rick Rubin comes from, you know, hip hop, and he produced Slayer records and Danzig and also Johnny Cash. But Johnny Cash, because of Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash can be mentioned in the same sentence as Slayer and Danzig and Run DMC and all these other bands, because Cash is cool. And Rick Rubin brought that coolness out of Cash, because I think Cash had sort of lost his way. He was going from record label to record label. He was on Mercury for a while, and he just sort of lost his way. And Rick Rubin basically said, listen, Johnny Cash, I want you and just you and your guitar. That's it. And the first album he came out with was my favorite by him, American Recordings. I believe this came out in 94. And the song I'm going to pick off of here is called Delia's Gone, which is an old folk country song about this guy who kills his girlfriend. And I mean, just a grim topic, but so cool. And Johnny Cash, that's what I loved about him. He could sing a spiritual, and then he could sing a song about killing your girlfriend. So it was awesome. And then the second album he came out with is probably my other favorite in the American Recordings, is Unchained, and he did this with the Heartbreakers. So the Heartbreakers came on deck. Tom Petty was there. I mean, I can't even imagine what the recording session would have been like. Tom Petty, Johnny Cash, Rick Rubin, the Heartbreakers, all in this room. I'm sure June Carter came in and brought them tea and crumpets or whatever. And I mean, that must have been amazing. And the song I'm going to pick off of here is Unchained. And again, I'm not a very religious person, but I can listen to Johnny Cash sing spirituals. And I think the reason is because I believe him. I mean, this guy, he had the song I Walk the Line, but this dude walked the line. Like, he sang in prisons. He did every drug imaginable. I don't think he was very kind to June Carter Cash, but he also was an extremely spiritual man, and he was able to acknowledge his dark side and his good side. And that's what I respect about him. And that's why I can listen to him sing a spiritual, because he can sing a song about killing a man in Reno too, in Folsom Prison Blues. So I had to mention my man, Johnny Cash. I actually saw him live in the 90s. I'm so happy that I can say that I did see him live, but you know, amazing artist.
And that's my favorite Van Halen cover also.
Unchained. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he did a killer job with that Van Halen song. And something completely different. I'm a sucker for a good pop song. And this band I still listen to today. I still love this band. They're a fun band. I saw them live too. And I still sing their songs when I play out live. And I'm talking about the Bare Naked Ladies. And this was their first album, Gordon, which is a classic. I'm going to pull the song Brian Wilson off of here. And it's just a great sort of ditty about Brian Wilson. And you know, it's they just have a great pop sensibility. And I love Stephen Page's voice. He sort of has this nasal quality to his voice. And unfortunately, he's not with the Bare Naked Ladies anymore. I don't really know the circumstances, but it's a shame, because I really think he really was the voice of the Bare Naked Ladies. And they were a huge college band, but they're still recording today. And they just sing a great pop song. And so I'm pulling Brian Wilson off of this. And then I'm pulling off of this album. It's called Maybe You Should Drive. I'm going to pull the song Jane. And Jane is just another great pop song. I mean, they're a Canadian band, and I love Canadian bands. There's some humor that the Canadian bands have in their music. It's almost akin to like English bands. There's this sort of highbrow humor to their songs that comes out, and the Bare Naked Ladies have that. It's just a really, really cool band. And yeah, and you know, here's a ticket stub from when I saw them. And I saw them back in 1998. So we're talking about the 90s. I saw them in 98. But yeah, just a fun band that I still listen to. I still sing their songs, still love them, and had to talk about them.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I don't think we've ever talked about Bare Naked Ladies in any episode we've done before. So
yeah,
glad you mentioned them.
I love what you said about believing Cash. I just want
Yep.
to kind of jump in on that really quick, because that's one of the things that's always drawn me towards him. Is anytime he starts singing about death or the other side or any topic that's even related to that, you almost firmly believe that he's actually died and gone to the other side and came back, and he's really talking from firsthand experience. And you feel it in everything, especially with the American recordings with, Ain't No Grave, and even the way he covered Hurt and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But even going back to his earlier stuff with things like Ghost Riders in the Sky, that song still to this day scares the crap out of me when I listen to it, because it's like, I believe it, I feel it. I'm there on the plains with him and watching this stuff happen.
Well, here's the thing too, and we mentioned that we've talked about Johnny Cash before, but whenever Johnny Cash sang a song, it became his song. Like, I don't consider Hurt a Nine Inch Nails song anymore. Hurt is a Johnny Cash song.
Right.
Johnny Cash did Highway Patrolman by Bruce Springsteen. I don't know if I consider that a Bruce Springsteen song anymore either. I mean, Johnny Cash just had that way about him. Like, if he covered your song, it was his song now.
Yeah. Really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, for a change in pace for me anyway, I am going to be talking about a heavy band for my third pick. And the band that I'm going with is, this is a song, and I heard this on the radio, and I was blown away because nothing I'd heard by this band up to this point sounded like a pop song like this one did. But I'm going, my first pick, well, first of all, the band is Soundgarden, and the song that I'm picking off of here is Black Hole Sun, which for me is the greatest song of the 1990s. If I had to make a list of my favorite songs of the 1990s, that would be number one. It's psychedelic. It's a great piece of songwriting. It's great pop rock. Chris Cornell was so versatile as a songwriter. I mean, everything Soundgarden had done up to that point had been heavy. And then he comes out with this pop masterpiece. And I hear it today and it sounds as fresh. I'm as excited to hear it as I am the first time that I heard it back in 1994. And I love it. I think it's great. I've heard other people cover it. I think I forget, there was and I can't think of his name right now. I've heard a lounge singer cover a version of it, and it sounds amazing because it's that great of a song. It lends itself to different interpretations. But yeah, Black Hole Sun, I love that song. And then my second song from Soundgarden is almost the sequel to that one. And that is Blow Up the Outside World. I don't have Down on the Upside, but I do have the A-sides. But I love that one as well. Again, it's like psychedelic, it's trippy, but it's got a great chorus. It's got a great bridge. It's just a trippy song. And I love it because it's so outside of anything else Soundgarden recorded. You know, they're like sludgy and heavy, and I mean, and all that's good, but I love when Chris Cornell would just kind of go retro and do a song that sounds like it could have been covered by one of the great late 60s bands. So those are my two favorite Soundgarden songs and two of my favorite songs of the 90s.
Can I say something about Soundgarden?
Mm-hmm.
What's really cool about Soundgarden is that their album Ultra Mega OK was released on the SST label. And a lot of people don't know that. I didn't even know that until I started researching it. But anybody who watches my channel knows I love that label, and Soundgarden started on that label, which is pretty cool.
Yes, they did. And I bet Aaron's got it on vinyl.
Yep, I have all theirs on vinyl.
Yeah, I think it was reissued, but because didn't they have that single for Flower too, right? Yeah, I think that's on the SST label.
And this was on Sub Pop.
Oh, Sub Pop. Okay, so I think Sub Pop must have picked them up.
Yeah, Screaming Life and Pop. That's a great one too. Early stuff there.
All right, the next artist, this is going to be my fourth pick. I'm going to go with Beck. And for me, I like everybody else, I think the first song I heard by Beck was Loser. And I thought, well, this is a novelty song. He's singing in kind of this stoner drawl. The lyrics don't make sense. He's kind of free associating like Bob Dylan used to do on some of his, mid 60s masterpieces. And I thought, it was a cool song, but it just sounded like one of those things where, well, he caught lightning in a bottle and you're never going to hear from him again. It didn't seem like he had any staying power whatsoever. And then, the next song that I became aware of him was on the radio, and it was a song called Devil's Haircut. And they played it on kind of the alternative station here. And I heard that and I'm like, this is the greatest song ever. For whatever mood I was in, I just heard it and I thought, I love this freaking song. And it was off what some people consider his masterpiece, Odelay, one of the greatest albums of the 1990s. And that's not even the best song on this album, I don't think. I think it's a great kind of stoner pop song. But the track that I'm going with off of here is Lord Only Knows. And it's an interesting track because it opens with this maniacal scream. It's just sort of, you put it on and all of a sudden you have this like scream coming out of the speakers, and then you've got some feedback and you're like, what in the hell is going on here? And then all of a sudden you hear this twangy guitar and a bit of drumming, and then it settles into this Rolling Stones Dead Flowers kind of a groove. And it's like, oh, okay, this is it's sort of a country honk kind of a vibe, and it's just a very cool country rock song. But I love it. And, Beck kind of was starting to get away from, the persona that he had on his first album, Mellow Gold, starting to mature a little bit more. But that one for me, and there's so many great tracks off this album. Obviously a song like The New Pollution is great. Where It's At, 2 turntables on a microphone it's perfect. It is a different direction for him, but he basically almost invented a new genre with this. And I'm sure Bob Dylan appreciated the way he would just talk, just make these nonsensical references, just total almost stream of consciousness lyrics that he would come up with. And then the very next album he came out with, and it's sort of similar, like you were talking with Alice in Chains, where you'd have kind of the rock album and then they'd slow it down and have a purely acoustic album. And that's what Mutations really was. This was the follow-up to Odelay, which is not what anybody expected. It's almost a pure acoustic album. But this is him like, okay, now you're going to take me seriously as a songwriter and as an artist. But the song I want to pick up here is Tropicalia, which is a bossa nova. It's a bossa nova Latin beat. And the subject matter of it, he's talking almost like somebody from Latin America who's making observations about tourists who are coming over from America and staying in cheap hotels. I mean, the line that always kind of stuck with me is, it's like the last line of the chorus is, misery waits in vague hotels to be evicted. And it's talking about like these, people who come to escape the misery of their everyday lives. They come to Latin America and, they indulge in all of their fantasies. And Beck is kind of making surreal observations about these tourists who are coming to all these, hotels in Latin America. And, some of these Latin America, their economies really, are kind of dependent on the tourism that comes into them. So anyway, it's definitely one of Beck's most unusual pieces of music. But again, Beck is so versatile. You never knew, like you were talking about, like Everything But the Girl. You never knew what you were going to get from Beck from album to album. And the next album he did, Midnight Vultures, was a total, almost like a Prince, or like late, early 80s funk kind of an album. Some of the lyrics and some of the takes that he makes on some of that, funk music is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I mean, that's really what Beck's all about. But stylistically, he's, from album to album, he's all over the place. And not a fan of much of what he's done lately, but I think he had a solid string of albums there in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Great pick. Great pick.
Thanks. All right, we're down to our last pick, numero uno. Aaron, what's your? I can't even imagine. I can't think of what Aaron would pick. I'm sure it's Depeche Mode. He showed Violator earlier before we started recording. I'm thinking it might be Depeche Mode now.
Yeah, there's only one choice for me for number one. And this band started in 1991, had a couple EPs. Their first album came out in 93. I didn't even discover them until 2001 when my friend brought over a couple CDs of theirs, and it just totally blew me away. And then I went backwards and discovered all their early stuff, and they're still going strong today. Just had a new song out yesterday, a new video come out. So, and of course, it's my favorite band, and they became my favorite band in 2001. Kiss had been my favorite band since about 1987 until that point, and they're still my second favorite. But it's Clutch. This is their debut full-length album, Transnational Speedway League, and it's never been released on vinyl. They need to put that out. 1993 was the release on that, and I remember I went back and I had a bunch of videotapes, and I actually had a video from that on one of my old videotapes that I didn't even realize until just like 5 years ago. It was a showman named Marcus. Really cool song. But see, they started out, and they had an EP called Pitchfork in 1991, and it almost has a punk quality, like a heavy Black Sabbath punk sound to it, and it's really cool. And then this album was their second full length. I'll use this as my first one to pull a song from. Their self-titled Clutch albums, their second album, and they are just a mixture of all different styles. You can't really categorize them in any one genre at all because they're all over the place. They always have a Clutch sound, but they switched from album to album. For a while, they had a keyboard, an organ player with them for a few albums, and it made them almost a space rock type stuff. They got into bluesy stuff later on. They were almost punk at the beginning, always with a hard rock undertone and some jazz influences even. And so I'm going to go with the song. Every song on this is great, but I'm going to go with the song Animal Farm, which I always love the lyrics. It's about aliens coming down and harvesting humans for food, and about them like escaping and not being caught up by the aliens. It's a really cool song, really interesting lyrics, heavy song. And it's just, Neil Fallon is, to me, the best lyricist since Bob Dylan. I just think he's an amazing lyricist. And then after that album came out, came this one, and this is really hard to get on vinyl. They really need to repress it. It's the Elephant Riders, and it's just, there's even like one song called Cracker Jack that's an instrumental, and it has some horns, and it's almost has a jazz quality to it. Then you got stuff like the Yeti, it's so catchy, and the Dragonfly and Wishbone, where they're singing about Thanksgiving and St. Patrick's Day. You know, it's kind of weird for a song to be like that. They have Muchas Veces, where they're singing Spanish half the time. But I'm going to have to go with the Elephant Riders, the title song. It's about a alternative reality of the Civil War. And there they are coming in with elephants riding into the Civil War. or the American Revolutionary War, one of those two, I don't know. It's an alternate reality of it, and it's just really interesting. Just a really great song. And there's the band. They're still going today. It's just they're my favorite band, and I thought it would be impossible to replace Kiss as my favorite band. But after I got into their discography, they have about 13 studio albums, EPs, live albums, and then seeing them live, and they're so good live. And that's my only pick I had really. My number one. It was instantly in my head number one. So there we go. And I talk about them too much, so I'll quit.
Yeah, I think in West Virginia, there's a Civil War memorial, and it's a giant elephant for all the elephants that perished during the Civil War.
Yep.
So I think, that was very cool of Clutch to commemorate that on their album cover.
Yeah. The song's got great lyrics too. It's amazing. The lyrics, that's the thing about them. You have to listen. It's like they're really good. Then once you sit there and read along the lyrics while the song's going, it adds a whole nother dimension, and it just blows you away because his lyrics are like nobody else's. And every album is like that. They're so unique. No one is like them. They're their own thing, their own genre.
Yeah. Well, as much music as you're into, to say that Clutch is your favorite band, that's about the highest compliment you can pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Exact same thing I was thinking.
And one of my best friends that got me into Clutch, it's his favorite band. I've got a couple other friends, it's their favorite band. It's like one of those things, once it clicks with you, they're just so different and unique that they have that quality to them that draws you in. And all their albums are totally different, but they still sound the same. They still have a Clutch sound.
Yeah, I love everything you've played me, and you've got me a couple Clutch albums. I love them. I love both of those that I got.
I work with a guy named Lewis, who again has kind of taste all over the place, and he's the one that introduced me to Clutch. He said it's his absolute favorite band. So another guy just thinks that they're their absolute best.
Yeah, they're just like that. It's kind of weird.
That's awesome. All right. So my pick, I'm going to keep this really, really short. So this should even take more than a minute or two, if that, because basically the reason why this band is going to be my number one for this one is because for me, it's like taking Leonard Skinner, the Rolling Stones, mixing them together, and then giving them a gospel or church background. And when you have like all of that genius coming together, to me, you get this right here, which is the Black Crowes. I bought a greatest hits CD one time, and this just always stuck with me because it really kind of summed up how I felt about them. It had a little hype sticker on the front of the CD that said, "The most rock and roll band of the day." And that's exactly the way that I feel them. They went back to something that was very pure about rock and roll, which is why I hint back to things like the Rolling Stones, back in the early days of rock and roll. I remember a long time ago, years and years ago, there was a thread that we did in the VC where we talked about can there ever be just like those absolute legendary albums? Like, can those still be made the way they were back in the day? Like, can we have another Blonde on Blonde? Can we get another Dark Side of the Moon and stuff like that? And one of the things that I said is, well, yes, it can be done, but it's extremely hard because so much has already been done. So to try to come up with something just so new and so innovative and to reach a Blind on Blind status, that's just a very hard line to walk. And so what I feel like what the Black Crowes did was they went back and kind of stayed in that era, that they didn't feel they needed to adjust to everything going on in the 80s and 90s. They were like, we're going to do Rolling Stones type of stuff. We're going to do Leonard Skinner type of stuff. Well, we're going to go back and grab those elements of the blues that made it so such an impactful genre. We're going to go back and grab elements of the background singing and the organs and all of these things that made the church and gospel music such a powerful force that has been in the world of music since who knows how many centuries ago. And they held on to all of that and just took it to a great place in modern 90s rock and roll. And so, when you look at their debut album there, of course, you have songs like Twice as Hard, Jealous Again, Hard to Handle, She Talks to Angels. Again, just classic type of things. But the one album that automatically made it my pick was this one here, which I just refer to this album as Southern, is the way I refer to it. But the reason why they're my number one is because in my mind, Sting Me is arguably the greatest rock and roll song ever written, from the first note to the very end. There's other things I may like just as much, but I cannot think of a better rock and roll song going back from the Beatles and everything else all the way up to today that is better than Sting Me. And I think that is because, kind of repeating myself, all the elements that they bring to that song. That if you want your gospel, if you want your old school rock and roll, if you want the Robinson brothers, obviously the lead singer and the guitarist, such a smooth, again, Skinner type of delivery. But I think the magic in that song is the female backing singers that they have, which again really bring that soulful context to it. And when you listen to Robinson playing the guitar throughout the song, if you really pay attention, he's never on one repeated riff or rhythm or anything like that. Until they get to the chorus, he is soloing through all of the verses the entire time. So between him just like never letting up and being in his own world, you have these gospel singers in the background that are just coming through with this beautiful support. You have that Hampton organ, whatever you call that, just, underneath everything in the back. It is just the ultimate rock and roll song that brings every piece of what made rock and roll great to the table. So, of course, picking songs, I'm going to pick Sting Me as my absolute number one. And then number two, I'm going to go with Thorn in My Pride. And I think it does very much all those same things, just on a slightly slower tempo song.
I love the Black Crowes, and my favorite song comes off that Southern album, and I'm going to go with the song Remedy.
Mm-hmm.
Love that song.
Yeah, I mean,
the Black Crowes kind of picked up where the Faces left off, Ron Wood and Rod Stewart. A nod is as good as a wink to a blind horse. Sounds a lot like, sort of Shake Your Moneymaker. That was kind of the template that they used for that one. But yeah, just great bluesy, almost like a elevated bar band. But it was just great, fun rock and roll to listen to.
Fantastic. Yeah, so that's my number one across the board. I mean, didn't even have to think about that one. Pulled that one out immediately and then had to figure out what the rest were.
Great choice.
Yeah, very good.
Well, this is probably not my number one band, but this is definitely up there for number one album of the 90s. And I didn't come up with this phrase, I'm sure, but I call this album the White Album of the 90s. And I am talking about Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy, and the Infinite Sadness. This album came out in 1995. Just the diversity on this record is why I call it the White Album of the 90s. I mean, it's just a sprawling record. And, I know a lot of people are kind of turned off by Billy Corgan's voice, but I like it. I like that sort of whiny quality he's got to it. The Smashing Pumpkins could be heavy, but they could be folky, and they were kind of all over the place. My two favorite songs I'm going to pick actually are off of this record. I'm going with 1979, and I'm also going with Bullet with Butterfly Wings. The world is a vampire. Boom, 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 boom. I just love, despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a cage. I still listen to that going to school. Like, I teach second grade, and I'm like, yeah, despite all my rage, I'm still just a rat in a cage. I don't know. There's just something about that. And, the other reason I picked this album too, this is actually very hard to find. The vinyl version of Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, the box set, I was looking on Discogs. This thing is like close to $400 or something like that. I'm like, holy shit. Like, I didn't pay that much for this, but it's kind of risen in price. So anyway, again, Smashing Pumpkins, I don't know if I could say they're my favorite band of the 90s, but this album definitely has got to be up there for me. It's just a killer record. It had a lot of hits on it. And I don't know if because they're still recording. I even like what they did with the band Zwan. I don't know if anybody's ever listened to them before, but Billy Corgan formed the band Zwan, ZWAN, and that was a double record too. That was pretty cool too. But I don't know if they're ever going to match this. I mean, it was one of those magic times for music. Yeah,
That's cool. Those are my two favorite songs of them too. That you picked.
yeah.
You're right though. That's the white album of the 90s for sure.
Yeah, and I did not come up with that. I wish I did, but for me, it's an accurate statement.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely one of my top 3 albums of the 90s. And the only reason I did not pick that, I didn't pick Smashing Pumpkins, was I was just sure someone else was going to.
Yeah.
That was the only reason I skipped it for this, because that album is perfection from top to bottom. To be able to rock it, like you said, as hard as it is, with stuff like Bullet with Butterfly Wings, and then come back with something like 33, and it's just, again, how do you go from just it's all over the place.
Yep. And that's why I like it. I mean, you guys know, we're all pretty diverse with our tastes, but I love it. I like to listen to everything. And that's why I like that album, because I get a little bit of everything, and it's just a killer record.
Great album. Perfect choice.
All right. Well, my number one band, this is a band that had broken up a while ago, and then they burst back upon the scene in the 1990s, almost better than ever. Unfortunately, one of their members had passed away, but they were down to a trio, but they, showed that they could still hang and, put out music as good as anything else that was coming out in the 1990s. As a matter of fact, they put out 3 albums in the 1990s, a band that nobody thought would ever get back together again. And talking about the Beatles, yeah. Woo! 1990s, baby. 1994, 1995. Oh yeah, that's my favorite. All right, no, I'm not going to cheat that way. All right, but I had to take that opportunity to give props to my favorite band. But anyway, now this is I'm sure people are gonna be like, what? Like they always do anyway, but I was a huge Police fan in the late 70s, early 80s. And so I'm gonna talk about Sting. And I love Sting's albums from the 1990s. And the first one that was released in the 1990s was The Soul Cages. And that's where my first song is coming from. I'm going to go with the song. It's called The Wild, Wild Sea off of here. And a little bit of backstory to this album. Sting's father passed away before he recorded this album. And so the album, he touches on a lot of themes about death and dying and, losing his father. And this song in particular, it's the lyrics talk about Sting having a dream where he sees his father again on this ship out in the middle of the sea, and he's reunited with his father, and his father imparts some wisdom to him. But it's got a very dreamlike quality to the music. It's just a sparse arrangement. It's got synthesizer, a little bit of drums and bass, but it's a long song, but it takes you on a journey. And it's one of those perfect Sunday morning songs when you're having your coffee and you're maybe sitting out on your back deck. It's just a chill track. And, I love the theme. I lost my father years ago, but so I can connect with the idea. I've had dreams where I've, seen my father again and we've been reunited. So, part of that resonates with me, the whole theme of the album and that song in particular. But I just love it. And Sting took a lot of heat for this album because it was very different from Nothing Like the Sun or Dream of the Blue Turtles. It wasn't jazzy. It wasn't the music that they had come to expect from him. It seemed very morose. There wasn't like a big radio hit off of it. All This Time, I think, was the one song that got played on the radio, but people were just kind of like underwhelmed by it. I think it's a great album. I love it. And I think if you spend some time with it, I think you'll find that it really is very much rewarding in its own way. So that's my first song, my first album I wanted to show. And then in 1993, he came up with follow-up. This is 10 Summoner's Tales. And I'm going to go with the song Heavy Cloud, No Rain. It's a song about rain, obviously, but he uses it in different scenarios. Like in the first verse, he talks about Louis XVI and the royal astrologer who has been sentenced to death. And he's praying for rain so that it will postpone his execution. In another verse, he's talking about a farmer who needs rain because his crops are dying. And so he gets this book of witchcraft, and he's trying to cast a spell, hoping that will bring rain. And, it's just people who, rain means different things to different people. And so, it's, like Sting does, it's kind of a clever lyric. But I like it. It's kind of a funky shuffle. It just kind of ambles along, but it's got a steady beat. Like I say, it's funky, but I think it's called 10 Summoner's Tale because there's 10 different songs. And Gordon Sumner is Sting's real name. And so Summoner, he uses the word and twists that around for the title of the song. But very much poppy song, more poppy than anything that he had done up to that point. And I think it was him sort of responding to a lot of the negative feedback he'd gotten about Soul Cages. But the first song I heard off of here was St. Augustine in Hell. And it was actually a music appreciation class. The professor played this for the class. He played it for the class because I happen to have the members of the Clash in my class. No, I'm stumbling over my words, but he played it for the class, and I was like, wow, that's Sting. It's so unique and unusual, but great album. It might be my favorite Sting album, but yeah, Sting's album in the 90s were great, and they were so different from what he put out with the Police. But and then he started to get into more ballads, and he kind of lost his way as he got into the early 2000s. But his 90s albums are all solid.
Good choice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Police fan. I mean, I like the Police, but I almost kind of like the Sting solo stuff sometimes a little bit better. I don't know, and I don't know, maybe that's sacrilege to say to like Police fans, but I don't know. I just kind of identify more with that solo Sting stuff. So
yeah, I don't think it's sacrilege, and I think it's interesting if the Police had stayed together, what direction they might have gone in. Would they have become like a jazz trio and then moved into different territory, or so I think these Sting solo albums are the closest idea we have what if the Police had not broken up in 1985 or 86, whenever it was. Maybe that's the direction they would have gone in, and they would have tried different styles. And
Police fan.
what'd you say?
I am a huge Police fan. I love them.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I like the Police. I'm just not a huge fan of them, but
I like the Sting solo too, though. I like it all.
Yeah, me too. I think you have to listen. At least I listen to the Police differently. Like it's more of like experiencing them. Like I'm listening to a jazz album. Like that's the way that I listen to the Police. But when it comes to actual sing along and really getting into the melodies and things of that nature, I like Sting more as a solo artist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A band we didn't mention tonight, which would have been a cool band to mention, is Primus.
Mm-hmm.
They were really cool too. Just sort of Les Claypool's bass playing and I
Weird.
can't remember what year Sailing the Seas of Cheese came out, but I think that was the 90s. But they were a cool 90s band too.
Yeah.
Or EMF. You're unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh.
I got all
Yeah.
these.
Yeah. Well, great picks, everybody. And now I've got about 10 albums I need to buy. So thanks for that.
I
But
feel.
yeah, well, and I'm interested, what Josh and Gary would have picked, but hopefully they'll leave their picks in the comment section. But yeah, great fun, guys. And maybe we'll do a 70s episode at some point because there's so many great musical decades to touch on. But 90s was lots of fun. So thank you, fellas. Thanks again, Brandon, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. It's a blast as always.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.